Hi, everyone. I'm your host, Dave Sands. Welcome to the Food Origins podcast. I'll be talking to people about their unique stories with food. And as a quick reminder, the restaurants and gear talked about on each episode can be found on my website, foodoriginspodcast.com. I appreciate your support. And thanks for listening. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Food Origins podcast. Today, my guest is Guillaume Bienaimé. He is the chef and owner of Zola and Bar Zola in Palo Alto, California. Guillaume was born and raised in Paris, France. We get into growing up there and his transition to the United States, working on the East Coast, and then eventually moving into California, and his transition from just at an early age cooking with his grandmother all the way to becoming a chef and owner of his own restaurant. Appreciate the conversation he had. Really enjoyed it. He gives insight into his winning production that he was on the Food Network show Alex vs. America, where Guillaume won the entire show and donated his winnings to World Central Kitchen, which is run by Chef Jose Andres. Appreciate all this. He gets into his preparation for that show, his winning dish, and then we get into the restaurant industry, some of the current trends and ups and downs, especially working through the pandemic and building a new concept during that time. And Guillaume's gets into his favorites, some of his favorite food, and definitely some local favorites. Really appreciate him coming on. And thanks to Jeff Wall, Robbie of Cuisinette in San Carlos. If you guys haven't listened to episode 9, Jeff Wall was on there, and also Lars Smith of episode 18 and of State of Mind Pub and Pizzeria. Appreciate all three of these guys. They are all friends, and it's awesome to have them all on the podcast. So go back and listen to them if you haven't heard them. Appreciate you guys for your support. Thanks for listening. All right, we're rolling. I've got Chef Guillaume Bienaimé here with me of Zola Palo Alto, and we are on location inside the restaurant, so I appreciate you coming on, and thanks for being here.
Well, my pleasure.
And, we'll get right into it. Why don't you, tell us about yourself and, what town you grew up in France and all that good stuff.
Yeah. I was born in France. I was born in Paris, and I moved to the U.S. when I was 2. So I came here fairly early. All my brothers, I have 3 brothers, are all born in the U.S. But French is my first language, and it's what we speak at home. And I spent, all my summers in France growing up. So going to French school here in the United States. So, I'm equally American as I am French, I would say.
Yeah. And what point did you come to the U.S.?
2 years old.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
Very young.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you're just constantly going back and forth?
Yeah, I went back every summer. When I was young, we'd go back really the entire summer. My mom would send us ahead of her and my dad, and we'd hang out with my grandparents for a month. And it was, we have a large family in France, so it was nice to be able to see them.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then where did you arrive in the U.S.? Where did you guys end up
New
living?
Jersey.
Okay.
Yeah, Chatham.
Okay.
We were there for 6 years. Then we came here to Palo Alto. Then we moved back to Philadelphia for 6 years, and then ended up here in 2000.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then, so you've been in Palo Alto since 2000?
Yeah. I went to Foothill College here for a couple of years, and then went to culinary school in Providence, and came back after culinary school.
Did you go to, is it Johnson and Wales?
Yeah, Johnson Wales, yeah.
Awesome. And that's in...
Providence, Rhode Island.
Yeah.
I went there. I'd worked here for a chef who had gone there, and I kind of had assessed my options. And Johnson Wales is the only accredited culinary degree in the country.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a diploma; it's a real degree. And I ended up getting a bachelor's degree in management, Foodservice Management. So I just felt like it gave me kind of the broadest education, as opposed to CIA is a 2-year diploma that has no real value in education. You can't go get a bachelor's after that. You'd have to start over essentially. So that was that's what I felt was important, and it's definitely helped me out.
Awesome. And what was it like coming here and then going back to France, mixing the two, blending the two cultures together? What was that like?
I guess looking back, it was sometimes challenging because culturally you're this French kid, but you're not really. When you go to France, you're this American kid, so you're kind of never really in the right place. But it also kind of teaches you how to adapt and how to be in certain situations, and I think it was definitely helpful for what I do now.
Yeah. And what was we could obviously this is about food and your origins, but what did you eat growing up? What was kind of the
so my mom cooked every night, kind of traditional French kids meals, which is like liver and onions and mashed potatoes with chopped ham, and we'd have like a soft boiled egg with toast. That's dinner, omelets. We always had a salad and cheese and dessert, so it was always like a 3-course meal.
Nice.
And that was a pretty nightly occurrence. Growing up, we really didn't go out very much. Going out was definitely considered a treat, and we'd go to we'd go to like get pizza or something that was something we couldn't make at home.
Yeah.
So I grew up with a meal every night.
That's awesome. And then what eventually you end up becoming a chef, but was there a point in your life that kind of sparked that interest into food?
I always saw as a kid going back to France and being exposed to my family food traditions, and then later on traveling and going to restaurants. My parents kind of traveling around France, going to country towns with restaurants that were serving kind of traditional French food. It's definitely something I always enjoyed. And then I was cooking, pretty young. I was cooking with my mom and then my grandmother. And when I was 15, I worked in a pizzeria in Ardmore, Pennsylvania, and started washing dishes. And it's just something I was always attracted to, that kind of lifestyle, the team building aspect of it, and just being able to hang out. It was like another family. So I just everything about it I liked from a pretty young age. But I wasn't sure about it until I worked in like a fine dining restaurant. That's when I very quickly then I realized that's what I wanted to do. Yeah. And I was about 20 or 21 when that happened.
Okay. Yeah. You mentioned, I've looked up a couple of things, and you speak about your grandmother a lot and how that was a big influence in your life. Why don't you tell us about that? Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I think it's a pretty nostalgic thing to talk about. My mom sometimes gets upset because I don't mention her enough. And I'd say, I was with my mom every day and she cooked every day. So that's obviously a huge influence. But,
for sure.
When you go, we had a summer house kind of near the ocean, and I'd go fishing with my grandfather, and then, peeling onions and potatoes and cleaning green beans with my grandmother. It is definitely something that you remember. It's a memorable part of your life. So that was just like it's the same thing as in the kitchen. It's the community aspect of it. It's doing it as a family, and eating together and taking the time to eat, and having wine with your meal. And so it's just like I kind of sometimes, it's different now, but when I was younger, I felt like in culinary school, like I kind of had an edge because I already knew what this was all about. Like I knew what this stuff was supposed to look like and taste like, and I knew what cooking was. And since so much of modern cooking is based on French food, I felt like I had an edge.
Yeah. It's an advantage for sure. Yeah. And then what was summers like going back to France? Like, were you cooking, or were you just being a kid, just playing around? What?
Oh yeah. I wasn't like, I'm not some kind of protege. I wasn't sitting there cooking all day.
Yeah.
You going to Euro Disney, going on walks, seeing the countryside, going fishing, going to museums, all the things that people do and all over the world, just living life.
Yeah. And what do you remember about like Paris food wise as a kid?
Well, it's not, when I was younger, my grandparents lived outside of Paris, so I didn't spend a ton of time in the city. In my teens, we ended up going to the city a little more, just to see museums and expose us to, the arts, obviously, and what Paris has to offer. But yeah, I've been able to go to France every summer, in my 20s, and go to whatever restaurants I wanted to, and have places to stay, and if I wanted to go to Paris for a weekend, I could stay with my cousin, and so it made it very easy. I did a stage at Guy Savoy for just like 3 days, but stayed with my cousin, so it made it easier for me to take the opportunities that came to me.
Yeah,
sure.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And there's anything you didn't like as a kid, as far as food wise, that you didn't like eating?
Not that I remember. Like they kind of ease you into it, but when you're eating liver at 5 years old,
True.
Your palate just kind of foie gras. I've been eating foie gras my whole life.
Yeah.
So my palate is definitely used to things, and oysters, from a very young age. So yeah, there's nothing specific that I didn't like. Sea snails weren't my favorite. It's like my grandfather loved those, and it was like that's a lot of ocean in your mouth.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was always at least like we were exposed to it and made to eat it, and so at least I tried it.
Yeah, I mean, getting that exposure, culturally, is awesome. Like, I've been talking to different people that hunt and fish, and right away it's fresh fish and fresh game meat. Growing up, and they're like, yeah, we don't go to the grocery store that often for meat or fish.
Mm-hmm.
And getting that exposure is killer.
Yeah,
it's awesome. And then like what's like a typical family meal like, growing up in either here or in France, dishes and stuff?
Yeah. In France it was either like oysters or pâté. You're starting with something. You're having like a sweet wine or a light wine, and or pastis, and you're starting with like pâté and maybe some foie gras and or oysters. And you're sitting around outside. Usually, you're sitting around a table. It's not the dining room table, so that's how the evening starts around 7 or 8. And then an hour in, you go sit down for dinner. And it's not like we're, we split it up, so everybody kind of makes something. We kind of have a schedule of who's making what night, so that it kind of gets split up. But it's it was always a vegetable, and there was always it was grilled fish and some steamed potatoes and green beans cooked in like tomatoes and garlic, and then after that would always be a salad and a cheese plate, and then if we're celebrating, there was champagne and like a strawberry tart, or if it was a normal night, you're eating yogurts and fruit. So it kind of depends on the night, depends on the occasion, what people did that day. Did they go to the market? Did they go fishing? Did they go to some village and buy some porcinis? It just depends on the circumstance of the day, I guess.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then you're traveling back and forth from here to France. You got any travel stories for us that you can think of? Comes to mind?
What do you mean? It's like
just anything, instance with food, or just something that that impacted you.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, call me. Everything was food,
Yeah.
Like you land in Europe, and you're actually one thing I love going to the Frankfurt airport because the food quality there is like so high, and just getting like they have these little sausages that they do and mashed potatoes, and it's always something I kind of, if I was going through Frankfurt because I was going to like a smaller town in France or something, it's something I kind of look forward to. And even just like the bakeries at the airports, or just the bakeries everywhere, but even at the airport, you're able, like, you land and you're like, wow, okay, I'm in France. And now I think the U.S. has caught up for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And we're getting pretty high quality products here, but there's something about just the smell of kind of, you get off the airplane and like you're in France.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
awesome. And then I always ask everyone about restaurants, and obviously you have your own, but we'll get into that. And you have some favorites, and it could be anywhere. Best and worst as far as restaurants go.
I'm not going to name any worst.
Yeah, I mean,
I live in
I'd say worst experiences sometimes, because I tell people they need to know about those once in a while as well. They're not always perfect.
I don't want to name any names.
You don't have to. Yeah, you don't have to.
I'll start with the bad, because honestly, I feel like there's a lot of that going on right now. But
yeah,
one thing that we really are adamant about here is like our closing time. We close at a certain time. It's 10 p.m. And that means you can come here at 9:55 and order a meal. And I've had in the last couple of years, I mean, obviously everybody's having difficulties with COVID, but for me, if you put your hours down, those better be your hours, and it happened to me on Tuesday night in San Francisco, where I'm showing up and the place is closed. And it's, it's really frustrating. Happened to me in Yountville, happened to me in San Francisco, like after a Warriors playoff game victory in the Mission at a bar. That was just, and I'm just like, what? I feel like that's such a huge part of hospitality is to just be open. It's like the first thing.
Yeah.
And for some reason, like this has been lost.
Yeah, it actually happened to me. It's funny you mentioned that. It happened to me last week. I went to a cafe, French cafe, by the way, and they closed in an hour, and I was there with family, and we were getting coffee and a pastry, and they were like, "Oh, we're out of coffee." I'm like, "How can you be out of coffee? You still got an hour left." And they're like, "Well, we didn't want to brew anymore because we're going to close in an hour." And I was like, "Well, I'm here to buy 4 of them, so." And they're like, okay. And then they regrettably brewed some more.
Oh my God, it's the worst, it's like the worst experience you can have. So those kind of things really piss me off because those are conscious decisions.
Right.
If I go to a restaurant and mistakes are made, I don't, it doesn't bother me at all.
Sure.
As long as they acknowledge them, they fix them, whatever. I mean, I don't, life's too short to be pissed off about a mistake somebody makes.
Yeah.
But
human stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. But that kind of part of it, I don't know what has happened since COVID, but it's like, seems like it's more than ever. And, I don't know, just change your hours. I don't know what to say.
Yeah, I know. It's unfortunate for sure.
So those are the bad. And then, for me, I mean, I don't, I have 2 days off and I've got a girlfriend and I've got an 11-year-old boy. So, we eat at places like Shake Shack. And if we go out, we go to Evia. We really go out locally. I'm kind of a homebody. I don't move around a ton. I'm not very interested in like, fine dining experiences. It's not really my thing. I mean, if I'm invited or some special occasion, I'm happy to do it. But, I mean, the last great meal I had was at the Progress in San Francisco. That was definitely like not a place I've been in a long time. I probably went to Staper like 4 years ago, but I felt like the food there was so inventive, but still really tasty. And that's like another kind of pet peeve of mine is inventive food that has no real like flavor to it, or no purpose or no story, or it's just all these things they put together.
Okay.
But I thought the Progress was just incredible food, great wine list, great service, and that's like that kind of gave me hope again in restaurants like that, trendy San Francisco restaurants. So that was cool. And around here, I eat at Evia a fair amount, just like super consistent. I go to San Agus down the street here for tacos and margaritas.
Okay.
And that's about it.
I know. Yeah. And then we were talking earlier, you have 2 friends that speak very highly of you. Geoffroy of Cuisinette.
Yeah.
And Lars of State of Mind Pub. So shout out to those guys.
Yeah, Geoffroy's like outside of my range of where I go eat.
Yeah.
And it's also French food, and it's kind of like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I love his burger.
Yeah.
And just the croque monsieur is delicious, but I don't, I work a lot. I don't eat very much lunch. It slows me down. And so,
sure.
And then, it's just kind of outside of the range of where we travel to go eat. We do eat a lot at State of Mind because we just love it, and now the slice shop is right there. So if I'm going down like the lumberyard or something, I'm definitely stopping by and getting a slice.
Yeah. Shout out to those guys. They're both killing it. And then that kind of leads into, a little bit more of getting into the local stuff. But besides travel stories and local spots, we'll get into your experience. Before we talk about your restaurant, you got a phone call to be on the Food Network, right?
Yeah. So
give us the how that all went down.
So they contacted me through email, and I think they also DM'd me on Instagram. That kind of speaks, I think, to the job that Eden's been doing on Instagram. Like it's like, it's always hard for us to really quantify the value, but because it's not, you can't directly say somebody came because of a post, but when you create, real quality content across the board and people see it like producers, they know you're serious right off the bat. So it's super important. And she's taken over since we reopened the bar. And so I think that had a lot to do with it. But they said they had this show and I was French. And so they were looking for very specific, like French trained, maybe speaks French, is available for these dates, is willing to do it. So they contacted me, and I get a fair amount of these. A lot of them are just kind of trash, and I don't usually, I never respond. But in this case, I was interested because I like competing a lot. I did it in college, nationally and internationally. So I thought I just like the premise. I like the format. Like I'm all about just getting to work.
Yeah.
So I went through a couple interviews, and then that was it. They kind of accepted me. Told me I could come down.
And that was did you do that last year?
I think we did it in May or April
of this year.
And it aired in October.
Yeah, it just aired not too long ago.
Yeah.
I was watching it. What was the experience like? I know it was was it shot all in one day or a couple days?
It was shot all in one day.
Okay.
We started at like 7 and we ended at 8, but it can end later. Depends on what's going on.
Sure.
And, you're really at the mercy of their schedule, so you're just doing, what they're telling you to do.
Okay.
And it's kind of like you wait, and then all of a sudden, like, oh, you're cooking now, So it's a bit like a roller coaster, like where you're going up, and then and then it's like, okay, we're going.
Yeah.
Now we're going. So yeah, you just kind of have to stay calm and be ready to work, ready to go.
Yeah, I watched the show, and obviously you killed it in the show. And spoiler alert, if you haven't watched it, Guillaume wins the show against Alex. And why don't you tell us, did you go in there with like a game plan as like, hey, these are maybe some ideas of dishes that I kind of are like, hey, if they throw this out here, I'm going to make this? Or did you just go, whatever they give me, I'm just going to play with what they got?
Yeah, so I did, it's French food. Right?
Yes.
So,
yeah.
It's going to be rabbit or duck or foie gras or snails or, those things are coming at you. Obviously,
Right.
you don't know, we got to pick, but we had to kind of negotiate that in the first one, and then she got to pick the second one. So that part of it you don't know. So I knew that, and so I had that in my head for sure. And I spent the night before rereading a book that I have called, I think it's called The Terroirs of France, but it's an old cookbook that has a lot of regional French cooking and some pretty things that are not common, I'll say.
Okay.
And super, like, this came from this village, from this family, or, the story behind everything. And so my first game plan was, like, stick to French. Don't do fusion. This is the French show. So that was, like, my first strategy for sure. So I read that book, and then I watched all of her show. I watched the whole, every episode before, and I took notes. And, you take notes on things like what judges are saying, what they're looking for, what they don't like. The judges are different, but they're looking. There's a. I'm sure they're giving him
a baseline.
I'm sure they're giving him. This is what you're looking for, and those things are real. So I watched every show. I took notes, and then I practiced just 2 recipes. I practiced the crepe recipe, just to memorize it and be able to make crepes, because it's just a very versatile ingredient, thing to make. You make it in a lot of different ways. I did that with my son. He timed me, so I knew, like, all right, in 5 minutes I can make crepes.
Awesome.
And then I made pâte à choux, which is also super versatile. And I didn't end up using it, but those were the 2 things. Like, I wanted to show skill.
Yeah. Explain that one to everybody. The pâte à choux.
Pâte à choux is a eclair or a puff.
Puff pastry.
Not puff. It's eclair dough.
Yeah.
Cream puffs.
Okay.
But you can also make Parisian gnocchi, or you poach it. It's like it's like a dumpling.
Yeah.
On the savory side, and you can make pomme dauphine, like mashed potatoes. You mix it, you fold in mashed potatoes to your pâte à choux, and you fry them, and they have these little, like, fried puffs. And then you can make, like, parsnip version, celery root version. You can fuse it with paprika or corn, so it's a super versatile ingredient.
Nice.
Or like base product. So I definitely wanted to have that. And again, those are the things, like, when people see, like, oh, you made a crepe, like, wow, okay. You weren't messing around. And it's French. You see a crepe, they're like, okay. This
I mean,
food,
they noticed right away, and they're like, oh, it's a pretty classic dish.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you got to choose a protein, or they chose a protein, and it ended up being duck, and it looks super good.
Yeah, but, so if it had been squab, I probably would have done the same thing. If it had been rabbit, I probably could have done the same thing. It's not like, it's real versatile. So.
Yeah, okay. And then explain what you made, and what was it like being under time crunch and cameras and everything going on?
Yeah, so that's the other thing about strategy. I mean, as soon as I walk in that kitchen, I'm looking around at everything, seeing where every ingredient is. I'm asking questions. I'm like, because they do a walk around, and you've got 10 minutes to like get your shit together.
Yeah.
Where I think other people like don't really use all that time to be thinking about what they're doing. My mind is going from like the time I step into that kitchen.
Yeah.
As to how I'm going to strategize, and what pans I need, and where they are, and all those things. So it's like you just got to start moving your brain real quick. And as far as the cameras, I'm just cooking. I'm not really bothered by having the cameras around. I mean, they're in the way a little bit, and so they're kind of moving you around and making sure you're not hitting him. And but you have a producer there who's essentially making sure that you're looking good and not messing up, and so you're in good hands. They want you to look good. It's not like they're trying to make you look like an idiot.
For sure.
So that was great, having that person there as like a point person. Yeah, so that was fine. I don't particularly like the interviewing part, where they have the camera in your face and you're just talking to the camera. It's definitely not my forte, but it's just part of the game.
Part of the show, yeah. And why don't you explain the two dishes that you made, and then we'll get into Zola. But
yeah, so the first dish, duck, which I really was shooting for, because it's just the volume of meat. If you're trying to break down squab, you can overcook it easily. It's a small breast.
Yeah.
The legs are like super delicate, hard. You can braise them, but they dry out real quick. So I was really shooting for that duck. You saw I kind of slaughtered that thing, honestly.
Yeah.
You have so little time. You're just like.
I noticed like there was some like they gave you the whole duck.
Yeah.
But then I saw like everyone got some there was
breast.
Pre-packed duck breast. I was like, wait, I thought you had to use the whole duck, but I guess there's different parts everywhere.
I think I used I did one duck.
Yeah.
And then I used two breasts. Okay. Just to save time.
Yeah.
I knew I didn't need that much farce. I didn't need that much filling. So
yeah.
I'm looking at the duck. Obviously you're trying to use the whole animal. I mean, that's like step one. So I have the crepe recipe in my head. I'm making crepes. I'm making a stuffing. I'm using the hearts and the gizzards and throwing those in the meat grinder, and the Madeleine acting as my binder. That goes in the crepe, and then okay, it's crepe and crepe Suzette. It's like super traditional. Orange sauce also goes with duck, so that was like a no-brainer. And then I was thinking, okay, this needs a vegetable, something a little bit lighter, a little crunchy. That's not lighten up the dish. Mustard sauce goes with duck, and so I had like two sauces, the gastrique and the mustard. So that's how it all comes together, just really based on traditional pairings. Things that you've learned, have been ingrained in your head. It's a little bit. It's just like a program. You just know there's like a matrix, and things go together, and that's how you put them together. It's not like it's all off the top of my head. I mean, it is, but only because I've memorized it through a lot of practice and reading and, through my work.
Yeah.
So that was that. And I did feel like it was maybe a little too sweet. Like going out, I was like, that's a little sweet, and it's kind of brown, which is something I'm like, it's one of my, I think, weaknesses. I often am like, I don't care about color. Like, the dish is what it is on flavor. Yeah, color's not. But I understand that it matters. So I felt pretty good. I thought I won with that dish, and I think I got second.
Yeah.
But that was okay, because I just need to get to the second round. I mean, you never know. I could have gotten knocked out, but I felt pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, the judges, obviously you don't get to know the judges till later, but they enjoyed your dish, and they talked about how classic it was, flavor-wise. The duck was cooked really well, perfectly. That's is what Chef Ludo said, and him, he's very particular.
Yeah.
And so that was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was, after that, I'm like, okay, round one's like kind of done.
Yeah.
I'm settled in a little bit. And I think maybe it gave me a bit of an edge because she then felt less threatened, maybe. Maybe she let her guard down. I don't know. But, I like to be an underdog. So
yeah,
I went in round two as an underdog, and I kind of tricked her into picking the snails.
I was going to ask you about that. It seemed like you were like, well, I don't really like them. And then she was like, oh, then I'll pick them.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, I didn't tell you I thought about, how I would trick her, but it was my natural inclination to just do that because I wanted snails.
Yeah. Okay.
I know how to prepare them uniquely. It's from that book, but I know that it's like other people do it. I learned it at, I worked with a guy who was a CDC at Gary Danko. So I knew how to braise them, and I knew it was like a very different preparation that would really set me apart from everybody else, So we got the snails, and what else did we get? Haute cuisine. we do hollandaise variation.
Yes.
So, I do like this kind of brown butter béarnaise sauce that I've been making forever. I learned from someone else, but it's not like terribly complicated, but kind of adds a little depth of flavor to the béarnaise.
Okay.
So, for me, hollandaise is really like a seafood thing. I mean, not for me. It's pretty classic, understanding of French food. And béarnaise is the meat version, right? And
right.
Escargot really is a meaty thing. I mean, it's an earthy flavored thing. So I went béarnaise, the brown butter. That was kind of out of the way. And then, again, I was like, this is classical French. I know it says haute cuisine, but I'm going to stick with something like super traditional. And that like the vol au vent puff pastry, it's like as classic as it gets in France. I mean, it's kind of 80s fine dining, but, I didn't care. I wasn't going to try to do contemporary, decomposed,
Right.
I really was like, I'm sticking with French. So,
yeah.
Porcinis and then red wine. That's kind of, a preparation I made before. Goes into the puff, the béarnaise. And then I felt like I needed something to kind of cut the richness. So parsley jus, parsley and escargot, great combination. So I made a parsley puree. I used the escargot stock for that to kind of add that escargot flavor into it. And then the pearl onions is kind of a classic vol au vent thing. And, vol au vent, a very classic preparation of vol au vent is like sweetbreads, or even like veal, braised, like a blanquette de veau, braised veal and white sauce, like white cream sauce they put in the puff. So I use the veal sausage as kind of a play on that, and give you this. It's a real neutral flavor, but it just kind of added this texture and was a little bit playful as far as the interpretation.
It gets, like it's hard when we're watching the show. It's a lot of it's chopped up, so we don't get to see every little process. I know just one thing that I wanted to ask you was I noticed when you put the puff pastry in, you had the silpat, the puff pastry, you cut them out, and then you put a grate over. Was that to keep it from rising in a certain height? What was that behind that?
The grate helps it. If you have like the right size grate, and you can put like little lift, something like a ramekin on the corners to get it a little higher is actually the best way to do it.
Okay.
But it makes it so the top is even. So how it rises unevenly, and then that first piece that touches will stop, and then it'll rise up. But the ovens there were a little janky.
Okay.
And so I started doing that, and I felt like my puff wasn't rising, and so I'm like, you know what, I'm just gonna get it out of there. So it'll just give you a much more uniform.
You get a uniform shape,
pretty cup, and that's not what I ended up with, but it all worked out.
Yeah, it sure did.
Yeah.
And you won, and she was touting that she'd been training for a long time in French cuisine, and you're like, well, I'm French, so.
I mean, they kind of
they chop it up and make it, look like you're like against each other.
They
or
get
something.
that stuff out of you, for sure.
For sure.
Say that again, and that's fine.
Yeah.
I felt pretty good about the way they presented.
And you performed well, and it was awesome to see you. It's a lot of pressure, to perform like that in a short period of time, right?
Yeah, you're not thinking, you're just going.
You're just going.
It's not like, it's again, I just have a lot of experience cooking and in competition, and all these kind of this repertoire I have in my head, and so I think, like I spoke about it earlier a little bit, but I stuck with that French theme. That's what I was going to do.
Yeah,
and that's my heritage and my growing up, and so where I think she went with that little contemporary with caviar, and I don't really know why. The caviar was kind of unnecessary. I mean, it takes away from the snail is the ingredient,
Right. Yeah.
So I thought that was not a great move on her part, but and mine was the opposite. Just super classic.
Yeah.
I knew these guys were going to be French judges, and they would be like, "Oh wow, it's like what I made when I was 20 and whatever hotel in Paris I was working at, or I thought that was going to be the
giving
vibe.
them their ratatouille moment."
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
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 And then once it was all done and you knew you won, you come back here, you're not allowed to talk about it until it aired, right?
Yeah, you can tell people you won. You just can't have
announce.
You can't have it go on social media.
Sure.
I think I would owe them a lot of money.
Yeah.
If it was if somebody posted it,
And speaking of money, it was awesome to hear that, and I think Chef Alex showed some respect for you too as well, as you end up donating the winnings to World Central Kitchen, which is Chef Jose Andres' organization, and that was awesome,
Yeah, we had already done a fundraiser here for him, for his organization once the war in Ukraine started, and so I had thought about that. Like, if I win, what do I do? And I can't. It's like, I was either going to do that or give it to my employees. So, I'm in a unique position where I can do that. I know for some people, they probably would have needed the money. So it's not like I judge people for not doing that. But, I didn't. I just wanted to feel like I wasn't doing it for money.
Yeah, it was awesome. And then, when you came back, and then once the show aired, how's business? How was that business impacted?
Well, we had a great, like, that week it came out. I ran the dish for 3 days. That was I think that was a record week. I think we beat it since then, but definitely very busy. I made a lot of those vol au vents for 3 days. I was like stuck in the kitchen just making them all night.
Yeah.
And since then, there are people that come here because of the show.
Sure.
But it's not like, we've always been quite busy.
Yeah.
And it doesn't hurt business. But I did it because I wanted the thrill of competing, and it's also great for the restaurant, which means it's good for my employees. So, whatever I can do to kind of put us on the map. Some of it is a bit like, feeling like we don't get a lot of respect in the suburbs, and so I wanted to show that we know what we're doing.
Yeah, you do, and that leads us right into Zola, Palo Alto, and you've been here a little over 8 years. Is that right?
Yeah, so we've had the dining room, which is, was called Zola and is still called Zola, the dining room part, and then we added the bar. So it's since 2014, and then we added the bar a year and a half ago, and the bar was in the plans before COVID. We had started construction before, and we continued construction during, and we reopened in May of 2021, just as kind of the everything was getting a little bit back to normal, and we've been lucky enough to have an outdoor parklet, which is kind of made everybody comfortable. People who want to sit outside can sit outside, and we kept the Zola name because we had kind of built this brand over 8 years and didn't want to completely lose that. But the menu is the same all throughout. There's one menu, and Zola now it may turn into all bar Zola at some point.
Okay,
it's kind of an evolution of the brand.
Yeah, and who came up with Zola? Is that
I did? It's named after Émile Zola. He's a French author, and was quite a stand-up guy, I'll say. But it's mostly was picked because the name's kind of easy to pronounce, and the Z is quite pretty for branding, and it's short, and so, and then it happens to also fit this kind of there's other stuff that's cool about it. People know who he is.
And you want to give everyone a breakdown of the restaurant, like what your menu's like and your concept and everything?
Yeah, so the original Zola 2014, I left my job at Portola Kitchen that I had opened. I'd kind of rebranded for someone. And I found this little space. It's 1,600 square feet, like 800 square foot dining room. And, it was like the rent was right, and it wasn't very much to get in. I already had a kitchen, and so my buddy and I remodeled it, and we did it in 6 months. So I got the keys on March 6th, and we opened it September 24th. And it wasn't like, I think it's a little bit like the competition. It's not like I had a grand plan, I just knew, all right, this lease is good. There's not a ton to do. Like, my buddy and I can handle it. It's small enough where, like, if I'm in the kitchen by myself, then that's what it's going to be. A worst case scenario was still palatable. And, when I first got the space, I thought I was going to do more like a casual small plates wine bar, because I had done fine dining at Marché, and I was kind of over it. But I looked around, I was like, man, there's like no French restaurant here. Definitely not in downtown Palo Alto, for sure. And even of the ones elsewhere, none of them are authentic. I mean, they're not even owned by French people or, run by French chefs. And they're more like kind of expressions of French food, kind of American expressions of French food. So I just wanted something that was kind of authentic and still modern. The whole gastronomie movement in France was happening, where things are just kind of taken a little bit less seriously, and just, in a way, I think, some traditions are more respected, but it's generous portions of food, and the price isn't crazy. And when we first opened, I think I had nothing over like $32 on the menu. So over those 6 months, this all developed. I didn't have a grand plan. It just kind of, as every decision had to be made, we made decisions and we ended up, with this, and all of that was just based on my experience. Every decision I made was because I had experiences, in France, or having run other restaurants, or, I was making decisions based on my experience. So there wasn't like a grand branding plan or, even concept really.
Right. Just evolving.
Other than it was going to be French food, and there was going to be kind of a California twist to it. So we had called it seasonal French cuisine. And that was in an effort to, as people didn't know us, they could, from our tagline, know what the food was. And over, it was like 6 years, the food, I'd gone through a couple different kitchen managers or, CDCs, and the food stepped away a little bit from French and got into a little contemporary California cuisine, I'll call it. And, this happens if you don't like re-steer or have like real clear vision. Sometimes things, veer off course a little bit. So I felt when COVID happened and when we had the bar now, it kind of gave us an opportunity to reset what we were about, and I really just wanted to go back to the simplicity of French bistro cooking. And so that's what we did. So we made sure steak frite was on the menu, and that was like a staple dish. And then we built a menu really around that. And, it's not like you have 1,000 choices. I mean, you have to have a white fish, you have to have salmon, you have to have chicken, you have to have steak, there are items you just have to have as a neighborhood restaurant in the suburbs. We're not a destination. We're not creating tasting menus.
Right.
So, a lot of it is just those slots that need to get filled, and they get filled with French inspired food. And then sometimes we can be a little creative, or, do tasting menus, but there's nothing wrong with just sticking to delicious classic food. And one of the challenges maybe is like inspiring young cooks to be into that, where they want to do all this weird stuff. But we're now that we've been successful doing it, people that work here, they see it and like, oh wow, this is cool, to be doing this stuff and not fusion or whatever, like minimalistic plates or whatever people are doing, smoked avocados. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean the classics sometimes are, like sometimes keep it simple.
Yeah,
and it always tastes good. It's gonna taste the same. You're not messing with it too much.
Yeah,
and of course, local ingredients makes it awesome. What was it like? It's a sore topic, but what was it like pivoting for the pandemic? How did you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, it first started, I was pretty freaked out, so I just closed the restaurant.
Okay.
And, we have a very small kitchen, or the restaurant was very small. You didn't have the bar at all. So I really didn't feel comfortable having people in close quarters. So even doing takeout, at least takeout, like just our regular menu to go, seemed impossible to me those first couple weeks. And then, I was in the middle of this construction. So that threw a whole other thing in there. And I just decided pretty early that I wasn't going to reopen until the bar was done. I didn't want to have to open and close and then open and then have to close because we had some minor remodeling to do here. And so that I think was the hardest part, was this uncertainty of everything. I'm sure I'm not the only one, even in other businesses, but just not knowing anything about what next week is going to be like. So I had to create those certainties for myself. I mean, I had a pretty good feeling that in a year and a half or whatever, in a year, things will calm down, right? So I just set these dates in my head of like, we'll get this done then, we'll open then, that we're pretty far out. And in the meantime, we did a takeout, like a take and bake program. So we did cooked here and put it all in aluminum tins, like kind of those old school Italian restaurants, use. And then we would cool it, and people would pick it up cold, and it would come with instructions for how to reheat it at home.
Nice.
And we did that. Like, I think you were able to buy it 3 days a week, and we cooked 5 days. We'd start prepping on Tuesday or Monday, or sell it Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So we did that. I had a friend doing bakery pop-up. I had another friend doing Chinese food, cook an old cook doing Chinese food and selling it to the Chinese, his community of Chinese people who wanted like the Taiwanese food. So, whatever. I mean, we just did whatever we needed to do.
Nice.
To to pay rent, stay afloat. I mean, my landlord is very generous, but we still needed to make some money.
Yeah.
And stay relevant and keep your mind going and, keep things moving forward.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I always ask, especially someone that it's your restaurant, what's your favorite thing at the restaurant?
Steak free.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't eat a lot here just because I'm here all the time.
Sure.
But if I do sit like every couple weeks, I'm just craving a steak with fries,
Yeah.
And my girlfriend's a pescatarian, so I just don't eat a lot of meat at home. It's the one thing I just it's like super craveable.
And is there a dish or something about the restaurant that not everyone you think knows about that you want to share about? Maybe something, I don't know. Something everyone else doesn't seem to think about when they come here.
The biggest thing, it's not something we're always trying to fight. I think we've done a pretty good job at it, and it's kind of why the name is Zola and it's not a French name. We just want to, it's a fancy place, kind of. I mean, it looks nice and we take care of people and everything's very high quality, but we have to kind of make an effort to make sure people aren't intimidated or feel like, oh, that's a French place. I don't want, it's fancy. And so that's like what we're just like regular people trying to make people happy. And, the prices sometimes can be high because, cost of goods right now is just crazy, but we're sensitive to that and try to make sure that things that people can eat that aren't. And, you can just come in here and grab a cocktail, and the bar's allowed us to really open up to like a new demographic, and younger people can come in here and have a drink, have a beer, and then also be exposed to something new, new cooking and things they never knew about before. So I think the main thing is like, don't be afraid. Just, come in, hang out, have a drink.
I mean, I've been here a few times and I've enjoyed every time I've been out here. And what's your concept with the bar Zola? So, obviously you knew you were going to open it. You were dealing with construction, and then once it's finished, what was your idea behind having the bar next door?
Yeah, I mean, the bar, again, it's not like we have a lot of conversations about what we're trying to do, or we were, and we still do, but we definitely were. And what happened was that with what I had here with about 1,600 square feet, half of a dining room, when I first opened, minimum wage was $10, and then by the end it was 16. So a 50% increase in labor costs. So having a restaurant this small just financially didn't work. Right. So by the end, I was basically breaking even. And so I saw that coming, and I knew I needed more revenue, and for me, I want to challenge something new. I love like great cocktails. It opens up the demographic, which is shown that it has. It gives people just a better experience. They can come here, have a drink, have dinner, go back for a drink, or, whatever, sit at the table all night. So it was kind of an organic expansion of what we were doing. And in addition, there's just there's San Agus now. They make great cocktails, but, Mexican inspired, so kind of specific. But, other than that, there's nowhere to go just have a drink. There's some dive bars that are fine, but for kind of an elevated, crafted and cared about cocktail, there was nowhere to go. So I felt like that was a good opportunity. And I think a lot of people are afraid of Palo Alto. You can't, people are telling me, oh, Palo Alto's not a cocktail town, or, the people don't go out late here. Yeah. But, we felt like there was a market for it. And from the day we reopened, we had the same hours. Well, I'll take that back. We opened at 3, now we open at 4. So that's the one place where, because business hasn't come back, like business people haven't come back, offices that between 3 and 4, there really just wasn't much going on. But, the late stuff, it's like there's nowhere else to go. So people come here because there's nowhere else to go. And they know they can show up at 10. And if they order at 10, they're getting a steak free at 10:15, 10:30. And there's nowhere else to do that. So we just felt like there was a market for that. And that's how, the bar came about. And the decor is just another expression of what was in here. So I wanted it to be complementary. So some things match, you'll see throughout the spaces, but they really are like for me, this is kind of under the ocean, and then that one's like the forest, so you're like traveling through different spaces, and this is a little calmer. And, people that are older or just want a quieter space are able to come here. And if they want to have a little bit more fun, they can go, or, just be a little louder, I'll say they can go next door. So it gives us these like different ways to satisfy people's needs. And then, I met Duncan at Cuisinette, actually. Geoffroy introduced me to Duncan, who's our bar manager here, and does a lot more than that now. So I was fortunate to meet him, and we Geoffroy told me, you need to meet this guy, because I was looking for a bar manager.
Yeah.
And, it didn't take us long to figure out we were had shared values and wanted the same thing and functioned very similarly, and, respected the same kind of ways of managing. And, so I met Duncan, and we, it's not like, it's a bit like cooking. I mean, cocktails are all based on formulas. So even though they try to make you feel like there's all these different things, it's all based on these formulas, and you can obviously, move things around, use more interesting ingredients. Yeah. And so we worked through some different ideas, how we wanted the menu to be formatted, and is it going to be French cocktails, whatever that means. It doesn't mean anything, because they don't really make cocktails in France. But and then we decided, let's just make like great cocktails, have all the right categories, and if there's a French thing that we like, let's use it for sure. But let's not like force ourselves into this category of things.
Because a lot of people are just going to walk up and go,
or you're not going to be able to put something you want on there because it's not French.
Right.
So it was so limiting.
Yeah.
And we didn't want to be limited to that.
Sure.
And so that's what we've done. And now we've trained a bunch of people. And, our first, Duncan was our first bartender, essentially working by himself. And then we added AJ pretty quickly thereafter. And the two of them had worked together at Trick Dog. And so, they have this huge network of people to pull from. And, we've had, now we have all these bartenders, and they're all very good. And two of them are essentially coming up with all the new cocktails. So
nice.
We've taken that out of Duncan's hands and let them kind of put things together. And obviously we taste them and tweak them and make sure they make sense. But it's been really great just seeing people be creative and letting them kind of take control of the menu. And we do these guest bartender events. So, I think it's another kind of part of like a bar. It just gives you all these opportunities and these different things you can do. So we did one last night. We do it every last Wednesday of the month, where we invite a bartender from, we've had two from San Diego, and most of them come from San Francisco or Oakland. Some of them are brand ambassadors. They're not working at a bar right now, or so they come down and they do a special menu, and it's a charity event, so they get to donate 20% of their cocktail sales to whatever charity they want.
Nice.
And so it's like a great way of creating an event, but it's really pretty casual, and it's been very, very successful.
Awesome. And then, are you still involved in Vinvino as well, or?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a silent partner there. I really have no, Lisa and Alicia operate the business, and Lisa knows much more about wine than I do, so it's not like I really have much to. In fact, usually I'm using her to learn, or if I have a question about something, I'll ask her.
Awesome.
What do you think about this wine, or I want a certain thing. What do you think I should get? So that's been nice to have a sounding board there.
Yeah, for sure. And then I always ask everybody, what's your favorite piece of gear or tool, either in the kitchen or for yourself? What's something that you like to use all the time?
I bought a Rationale oven during COVID because a former cook of mine was selling his oven, and John Shelsta kind of encouraged me to buy it, and I had never used one before, and that's probably that's pretty game changing.
Yeah,
and they're expensive, but they're really just awesome machines.
Describe it. What's the name of it?
It's a Rationale. So it's a combination.
Yeah.
So it's a combination steam and dry heat.
Okay.
And there are other brands, but Rationale is kind of the original. They're made in Germany, and they have a computer, and so we can do hard-boiled eggs in them. Right? You just steam them. There's a setting. You just press hard-boiled eggs. They go in. They steam them. So they don't take up room on the stove. You don't have all this water.
Yeah.
It gets done in half the time. So like the slow cooked eggs we used to do in a circulator with water, and an egg would crack and fuck up their whole shit.
Sure.
I don't know if I'm allowed to curse, but
you are.
Now you just do it in the combi, and it's a steam, and now we have the formula, whatever it is, 40 minutes at X temperature, and so
right.
vegetables, and I'm smoking scallops in it right now. It has a smoking attachment. And it's self-cleaning, so it always stays clean.
Yeah. Really cool.
Yeah, it's a cool piece of equipment. And traditionally, it was used a lot more in like large food service, like corporate hotels, cruise ships, because it has all these programs, and you can create programs. So you can create like a roast beef program. You just put the thing in there, put the temperature probe in, hit your button.
And then you'll know it's going to be
very
correct.
Consistent product. Yeah. And so I have to assume it's been for quite a while now. Been at like 3 Michelin star restaurants, because it's just a great machine. But for me, it's new. It's been a couple of years now, but I just bought 2 new ones that are coming, replacing this one. Not something you're just going to buy at home, I guess. But
no, that's all right.
Yeah.
But, but that's just, that's what people want to hear, though. What people are using and what's making things.
Yeah, and the other thing
flow.
it comes to mind. I like, people always ask me about knives, right? And I just use like a 8-inch Mac knife. It's like $125. It's got the little divots in it. I like that because it doesn't stick to like the potato. And I don't know. I'm like a big proponent of just a reasonably priced knife that you take care of, and you're gonna buy a new one every, whatever, probably at home, not that often, but by the time every time you sharpen this thing, it's coming down. So don't overthink the knife thing. Just learn how to sharpen. Is probably the first thing.
Yeah.
Because there's no point in buying an expensive knife if you're not ever gonna sharpen it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. That's one of the first things we learn is keep it sharp.
Yeah.
Never, you don't want to be prepping with a dull knife.
Yep.
Get that going. And that kind of closes us out. Is there, I think one more thing I would mention, is there a recipe or a dish that you'd want people to try that you think that, hey, this is something, it's part of me or part of my culture or part of your background with all your experience, or something like, hey, it's not something,
and the one thing that is there's a sauce that people always love, and it's super versatile. It's called sauce verte, salsa verde in Italy. Salsa verde. So it's just you can chop parsley, olive oil, maybe some minced shallot and minced capers, a lot of olive oil, lemon juice, and then there's variations. Obviously, you can throw some garlic in there. You can put tarragon and other herbs, tarragon, whatever herbs you want, really. And it's, I think traditionally it's done in a mortar and pestle, but we just chop it all up here. And you make the sauce, and then it's great with fish. It's great with grilled meats. It's like, you just put that on the table, and people are like dipping bread in there. And it's like, you put anchovies in it too, chopped anchovies. So it's got umami, and it's bright, and it's fresh. It tastes healthy. It is healthy, and it goes with like so many things, and we don't make it a lot of the restaurants. It's actually quite, once you make it, you have to eat it.
Yeah.
Because the lemon juice will oxidize it'll brown the herbs. So in a restaurant setting, it's kind of a pain. Actually, we'll do it for specials, but at home, you just make a big bowl of that and surround it with grilled meats and vegetables and call it a day.
I've had it. Awesome.
Yeah.
And then, to close it out, the floor is yours. You can give advice. You got some business promotions coming up, anything?
I have no advice to give.
I'm sure you got a couple nuggets for us. But
yeah, the only thing I'd say is come over to Bar Zola, and even if you don't want to commit to a meal, just come hang out, have a drink, see what these guys are doing behind the bar. It's pretty cool, and I don't really have anything to announce quite yet. I'm working on something, but I'm not ready to announce it, so.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah.
I mean, this podcast will be out in a few months anyway, so
we'll see. Yeah, but we'll see. Maybe I'll give you another snippet if it happens.
Yeah, and I'll definitely, once this starts to come back, I always come back and see what's going on, and we'll put it out on social media and everything.
Perfect.
So appreciate it, Chef. Thanks
for
being here.
Yeah,
and,
that was awesome.
Thanks for listening, everybody. We're out. Take care.
Thank you.
And as a quick reminder, the restaurants and gear talked about on each episode can be found on my website, foodoriginspodcast.com. I appreciate your support, and thanks for listening.